All right, welcome into UPod to win the game. I am here with the myth, the legend, where has she been in our lives for the last couple of weeks? Jori Epstein, welcome back to UPod to win the game. I am Charles Robinson. She is back in the house. She's now in her house. So many things have been going on the last couple of weeks. We're so happy to have you back in, Jori. How you doing?
I am doing great. Thanks so much, Sierra. I'm actually currently in the Yahoo New York City office, which I'm pretty pumped about. First time visiting here. So I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to be back on the pod, and thrilled that you have power since that was not a thing yesterday. So
yeah, we're a day late.
Here.
Sorry to everyone. We're a day late.
Playing the Houston Power Grid. But no, I'm really excited, and I think we've got some great news to talk about today, and I also like what we're going to be doing later in the show, so I'm ready for it.
We'll get to it a little bit later, but we're going to run through the NFC teams and just basically say, have they made a move to really turn themselves in the right direction? And if they have not made a move, like whatever that best move might be, what could it still be that's on the plate? So we'll look at the 16 NFC teams and just sort of eagle eye a little bit in terms of what they've done this offseason, whether or not their best foot forward has yet to be taken. But first, got to get back to Jalen Hurts. Charles McDonald and I did the All Juice podcast, obviously Monday. Didn't have a chance to really get deeply into Jalen Hurts. And you ended up writing a winners and losers piece where you said the biggest loser by far, Lamar Jackson, with this deal. Interested to kind of debate you on that one. No question that the Jalen Hurts deal is about as buzzy as you can get in terms of something that's happened this offseason. But Lamar, let's talk a little bit about Lamar. Why? I think it dialed in sort of what reality is in that situation. So to me, I felt like, well, the upside here is at least everybody kind of knows what reality is now with Lamar. So there's no more dodging it or ducking it or what's the framework of things. It is what it is. Either now you're going to do it or you're not going to do it if you're the Ravens, and there's an element of clarity. You tell me, though, why Lamar ultimately loses out in this situation.
So going into this, and probably still, Lamar Jackson wants a fully guaranteed contract. And I think when you see the deal that Jalen Hurts got done, it just kind of shows the NFL is not moving in that direction. Deshaun Watson was a one-off. I had an NFC executive tell me the week before when I was writing about Lamar and Odell Beckham Jr., he was like, Lamar's going to realize this was an anomaly, and Justin Herbert's not going to get a fully guaranteed contract, and Joe Burrow's not going to get one. And Jalen Hurts started that trend a little bit earlier than we were even expecting with those other teams. And I think, look, I get that Lamar was an MVP, and I get that he has not had the kind of help that Jalen's had around him. But if you want to talk about the biggest knocks against Lamar, it's injuries and his playoff history. And you have Jalen, who just took the Eagles to a Super Bowl on his rookie deal, not getting a fully guaranteed contract. You have Jalen, who had the injuries, but then came back and was able to be really strong in the playoffs and arguably the best player in this year's Super Bowl despite coming back from that injury. And he didn't get a fully guaranteed contract. Now, that doesn't mean that Lamar is a loser in the sense that he won't get a lot of money, that the Ravens won't want him, that another team won't want him. It means that if that was his goal to get a fully guaranteed contract, he took a step back from that this week. And the other thing I'd say is just that Nicole Lynn was Jalen Hurts' agent, and she hadn't negotiated a kind of contract quite like this before. And so we see like there's a role for the agent and that there's a role for that conversation to happen. And one of the things I really praise the Eagles for this week is getting this deal done early. And I think that that is something that is easier to do when you have an agent and you have a team and both willing partners. And that's not where Lamar and the Ravens are. And they're not even.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good point. I guess from my standpoint, I don't think anything's really changed in terms of if Lamar wants a fully guaranteed contract. No other quarterback was going to accomplish that for him, okay? The two guys who previously accomplished it before, we've talked about this, were Kirk Cousins and obviously Deshaun Watson. And they put themselves in that position by either playing out their tags and hitting free agency or just straight up saying, I'm no longer playing for you and sitting an entire year. I mean, like it doesn't change to me, regardless of what Hurts did, regardless of what Burrow does or Herbert or anybody else. For Lamar, it doesn't change anything. Now, obviously, for the Ravens, it does change things because it sort of burnishes their ability to point and say, hey, look, it's not something that teams are doing. Like the Deshaun Watson deal is an outlier, and you're going to have to come to terms with that. And now we've seen a couple of contracts come in that were not fully guaranteed. So, there's a little bit of strength that the Ravens pick up in terms of their argument, but I don't think Lamar's cared about their argument up until this point. So to me, their position is their position. It's going to keep being their position. And for Lamar, if his position continues to be, I'm going to need to be fully guaranteed in this deal, okay, well, the track is there. That's it. You know what it is. Either don't play and force their hand, or play like Cousins did and play out the tag and then go to free agency. And I think if he played out the next 2 years and they looked relatively similar to what we've seen in Baltimore and he's healthy, right? I think he goes to free agency, he gets his fully guaranteed contract. I really do, because I think there will be teams out there that will sit there and go, we're desperate. We need a quarterback. We're willing to give him $50 million a year or whatever it is at that point for 4 years. So we'll sign him to a 4-year, $200 million fully guaranteed contract. He just has to bet on himself the next couple of years and not get hurt and continue to play at a pretty high level. We end up spending so much time talking about Lamar, but if anything, we really should probably be talking more about Burrow and more about Herbert and more about Trevor Lawrence, because the thought process now is those players aren't going to go to the table saying, I need a fully guaranteed contract. We don't know that for sure. I'm assuming that because now we've had other quarterbacks go to the table and not say it. Lamar is an outlier here. So I think really the Hurts deal sets the table not only of expectation, in terms of the Ravens and Lamar, but really the Spanos family now has to look at the Hurts deal and go, okay, that's what that looks like. Mike Brown now has to look at that deal and go, okay, Shad Khan now has to look at it and say, this is reality. This is what's coming for me. And what they're going to respond with, my assumption, given that Mike Brown's already kind of waddled his way down this road, is let's do the Patrick Mahomes deal. Like, let's do a 10-year, lock you in for this long period of time with some rolling guarantees and give us the ability to, we'll pay you a ton of money, but we want to have you locked in for 10 years and hopefully that contract won't change. So good for Jalen Hurts. Real quick before we move on, you and I agree that this is a really aggressive, it's a really aggressive risk by Philly, right? Is it not? I mean, I think it's okay to say it. I think it's the right risk. I think it's appropriate. Everybody I've talked to across the league, no one's had a bad thing to say about this contract. Everybody gets it. Everybody likes it, makes sense top to bottom. Still though, we got to admit, it is an aggressive risk, right? Talking about 2 years, you got a 2-year window that you saw into this guy. And now he's the highest paid player in the league APY.
I think I'd say two things. One, the word aggressive. Is it aggressive relative to the league? Yes. Is it aggressive relative to what Philly usually does? No. I think it's in line with it. So I think it's pretty much their strategy, but they've been aggressive for years in free agency and deals, etc. In terms of the risk, I think it's a risk doing it later. I think you either have to commit, you're either committing to him or you're not. And if you're committing to him, it's getting more expensive, I would guess, certainly by June or July, and if not, certainly by September, because think about it. The year that Carson Wentz and Jared Goff signed their deals, they signed them in June. And then you had more deals come in September. And by the time the Cowboys signed Dak about a year and a half later, it was a lot more expensive, like $7 million a year. And so I think you are being just conscious of the reality of the market. And I think the other thing we'll have to see, unless you've already seen that full contract, because I haven't, is yes, there's the APY. Yes, there's the guarantees. When are those guarantees coming in play? Like, what does that mean? I think there are some questions about the structure that whenever we first hear about a deal, we should be a little skeptical about until we've seen it. And the other thing I'll say is I think it's so wise when you have a quarterback you like and you believe in to sign him before the final year of the rookie contract, because then you're just getting such a different level of value that, yes, the new money average is $51 million per year, but look at their cap numbers over the next few years. They still have a lot of cap space while they're in their Super Bowl window.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way it's structured, as you said, it is new money. The APY is new money. Teams like to fool themselves into going, well, we still got him. We'll stretch it out over the remainder of what's still here. I get it. Makes you feel a little bit better about the deal you did. I think for me, though, I guess the risk is sort of Hurts did suffer an injury last year. Okay. He did. Right. He had a shoulder injury.
Both the last 2 years.
Yeah. And so I'm not saying he's a 1-for-1 with Kyler Murray, but Kyler has been a player now that I would say is injury prone, does not stay healthy, and now has suffered a significant injury. Hurts' game, much like Lamar's, has a very run-heavy aspect to it, which means he's going to continue to take these hits, and it's also going to be a depreciating asset in his game once he gets to a certain age. So, yeah, I just feel, like I don't have any problem with the risk. I think it's a good deal. Like it makes sense to me. The timing makes sense. You laid it out. That all is wise. And they do have the track record of doing deals before. And clearly they're not afraid to miss because they went through it with, the wood chipper with Carson Wentz and that deal. And they're just like, whatever. Like we keep rolling. And they have an owner in Jeffrey Lurie who's behind them. So I just think it's okay to acknowledge that, this is
I just want to say, I'm not saying there's some hypocrisy here, but I am saying that you just tried to convince me 2 years, Lamar's going to get that fully guaranteed deal if he stays healthy. And while you're saying this, I'm like, why do you think he's going to stay healthy? And why do you think that his depreciating value of his legs are not going to depreciate?
Oh, it's
now
different.
You're like,
it's
but
different.
Jalen will depreciate.
No. It's different. It's different. I am saying you've got a player who wants something, and the only way to get to it is to bet on himself.
Is it this thing that almost certainly will not happen with his health and value of play?
Okay, but it doesn't matter. It's what he wants. So if you want that, here is how you have to accomplish that.
Right.
The other side of this, in terms of, I'm looking at it with the Eagles in terms of the team cutting the checks. Okay, we're the one paying you. We're dependent on you giving us what lives up to this deal. Whereas Lamar, he's heading towards something. Now the Eagles are sort of, they got to reel in this performance from Jalen Hurts and frankly, puts a lot of pressure on them too. You better protect him. You better, and we're going to talk about the Eagles when we get to the NFC and that'll fold into, I think, some of this conversation. So,
I think the last thing that we learned from this Eagles deal is that for everyone who said Jalen Hurts last year was very much a product of his surrounding cast, the Eagles don't think that way. Because if so, I don't think they would have done this deal.
Speaking of quarterbacks and feelings, you talked to Brock Purdy, and it was great. A couple of things I thought. Number one, teams are probably should ask their players, hey, you working with like Buffalo Wild Wings, or who are you working with? What interviews are you doing? And what are you going to say? Because I got to tell you, when I saw, and I hadn't seen it, it came across to me, not that it was yours. I figured it out quickly after I saw that Brock Purdy had said he wasn't entirely sure when he was going to play in 2023. I was like, wow. I don't know if I would have wanted him to say that if I was anyone in the 49ers organization. Obviously, you spoke with Brock Purdy. Very good job. Jori has a way of getting people to be very candid in their replies in some of these interviews. I enjoy that. I mean, what's striking to me is he said the truth that I think deep down we all know, right? We all know. We don't know what's going to happen with his elbow surgery. Like, who knows what ultimately that's going to look like. But to have him admit that to you, it's really interesting. And I think it's a splash of cold water on maybe these 49ers fans who think, hey, maybe this guy shows up at the beginning of the season. Doesn't feel very realistic to me. But your takeaways from the interview and honestly, just that candid moment where he basically told people what we were all kind of thinking.
Yeah, so definitely been on a lot of calls about this story this week. But I would say that one, before we get to that line in particular, more broadly, so Brock Purdy had surgery March 10th on his elbow, just to recap people who weren't following super closely, tore the UCL in his throwing elbow in the NFC Championship game at the end of January. And so then he waits, he gets that surgery once the swelling goes down, And rather than needing a full repair of his UCL, he was able to just do a reconstruction, which seemed to expedite his timeline. Had he done a full repair, which would basically be Tommy John surgery, he probably almost certainly would not have played in 2023. So now it's like, okay, more like 6 months. And the rule is after about 3 months, a player can throw. So they're hoping that he can start throwing in June. So first, it's worth noting there was a picture circulating on Twitter that Brock Purdy took with a fan, and he's in this sort of like bionic-looking cast on his elbow. Yeah, so he has an internal brace and he had this external brace, and Brock did confirm to me that the external brace has now been removed, which he hadn't yet reported anywhere, and so that is good news. He's got more mobility, and even though he can't throw until what's looking like June, he is able to do a little bit more and stay in shape. The next standpoint is the Niners say, hey, in June, he can start throwing. And once he starts throwing, we can get more of a sense of like, where is he on this path to recovery? So that's the backdrop for where this conversation came up. And as you can imagine, there's definitely a lot of interest from Brock Purdy and his team in saying, I'm not sure. We're taking this one day at a time. We're focusing on the progress. I was asking him, I'm like, look, when I covered Dak Prescott in his return from 2 ankle surgeries, he would talk about, okay, now I can jump and I couldn't. Now I could cut. Now I could run. Like, what are the little wins? And so we talked a little bit about that. And then I had asked him after he talked to me about it being day by day and his plan, I said, last question, do you have a sense of if at some point this season you'll be able to play? And his answer was, I'm not really sure, honestly. I think I've just got to take it one day at a time, get healthy, start throwing again and things like that, and then just go from there. But it's all going to work out how it needs to. So the question was, do you have a sense of if you'll play at some point this season? Now, whether Brock thought he was responding about when is he returning, I'm not sure, versus will he return this season, I'm not sure. I think the question was absolutely fair in the way we reported it. I strongly stand behind because the question was about this season. But what I think is worth noting is like kind of what you said is that they can't know yet. And they sort of both want to be like, we can't know, but also we don't want you to think we're saying he's not coming back, but it's too early to have a timeline. Right. And so I think, like you said, it's sort of like, it's not wrong to say that they don't know 100% he'll be back. Because that's what I was saying. I wasn't saying, will you start? It was, will you be healthy enough to be cleared this season? And they're just not at that point in the recovery process. Also, I would like to remind fans we're recording this on April 20th. The season starts in September. So there is time, but I think that it became even more interesting of a conversation when there circulated some reports this week that teams are calling about Trey Lance.
Yeah, well, first off, you touch a nerve, when you report something like this, because teams, if you talk okay, you're talking to a general manager, a head coach, or whoever, and you say, all right, we're off the record here. They'll go, we have no idea. Like, they'll be like, look, we don't know. And they'll be like, we're on the record. We're extremely optimistic. Like, it's just, they don't want the messaging to be one of an opaque nature, because that's scary.
Right.
It's scary to sit there and go, we got Sam Darnold. We got this other quarterback who we gave up all these assets to, who we seem to be out on, who also had his own surgery. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't – with fans, it scares fans. With the teams, it scares teams. I'm sure with Brock's circle, it scares them because nobody wants to think about the unknown. And I actually thought that answer from him was appropriate. It's going to happen the way it's got to happen. Like, that's fine. Just live in that. It's okay. Let it be what it is.
The report is not that he's not coming back this year. It's just that the recovery timeline is too soon. And I'd also like to remind anyone listening to this podcast or following our reporting generally, his head coach once said, I can't guarantee that anybody in the world will be alive on Sunday. So if you can't guarantee if you'll be alive on Sunday, why is it so crazy that you're not sure if your elbow, which has just undergone a big surgery, will be healthy enough in September?
Why you got to bring up Stop bringing up old quotes. Stop holding them to the previous words. No, it's whatever. Everybody calm down. Okay, let's move on to Trey Lance, though. How many times in this podcast we try to tell y'all, problem with Trey Lance, the confidence not there. Like, this is definitely an issue for them. The report that comes out, they're taking calls. He's for sale. Okay, that's what that is. So when someone reports, they've received calls, it's the most hilarious reporting ever, because everyone should automatically know when someone reports they have received calls, it means they are taking calls. He's on the block without saying he's on the block.
Should we call for Trey Lance?
Yes, we should.
Yeah,
We should.
you
We were like,
bought to win the game.
yeah, you're taking calls,
we're
right?
interested.
Like, co-producer role for Trey Lance. His value is not high. People need to understand this. And I've seen a couple people who should have known better, who should have been like in this business long enough to realize, don't even suggest that they could possibly get a first round pick out of this guy. Okay. You're not getting a first. Nothing close to it. Okay. And if you do, I will applaud John Lynch. I will applaud Kyle Shanahan. I will applaud Adam Pete. I mean, anybody involved with it, I will absolutely rip probably the acquiring team, to be honest with you. His value is maybe somewhere in the range of a third and another asset, I think. And that, I think, is maybe even a little optimistic because teams, and I've talked to teams about Trey Lance, they look at him and they see a player who hasn't played in a really long time. Has not played a lot of football in a really long time, okay? Then creeps in the fact that his collegiate resume was really one season. And now he just feels like this big, massive gamble. And I was talking to a GM and he said, look, they have had him now, okay, for a couple years. They know what they've invested in him. And it should absolutely tell you something that the last pick in the draft walked in and stole this guy's job in a handful of games. And that then he suffered an elbow injury and they're still backing the last pick in the draft last year. They are giving you their assessment on Trey Lance.
Right.
That's what you need to know.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that. I have two thoughts. One is that I was telling our editor, Joey, today, I want to work on a story on this after the draft of, we hear about so many teams, they draft a quarterback. What's it going to take to succeed? What's the likelihood that a high draft pick like Trey Lance, third overall pick, was going to be like, what do you need to do to not bust on that pick? But the Niners are that rare team that are winning and playing at a really high level and going deep in the playoffs in spite of selling out for Trey Lance's draft spot. And I think that's fascinating. And I think if I'm the teams drafting a quarterback this year, whether it's the Panthers who moved up or just a team that already had a high draft pick, what can I learn from them? So yes, your goal should be for this guy to succeed. You're investing in him. But if he doesn't, what kind of infrastructure like San Francisco can you have in the background? That fascinates me. The other thing I'll ask you is, who do you think is calling? And who do you think, which teams, if you were their GM, would you take Trey Lance for a third-ish? I mean, would you take him if you're Minnesota? You know that Kwesi's got relationships from when he was in San Francisco. Right. Commanders. I mean, who are you taking?
I think Kwesi. I think that's legitimate. I think Minnesota, would be one of those teams that would call. I think Tennessee with Rand Carthen would be one of those teams that would call to have that conversation. So there's the element of familiarity. I am sure that there are other teams that might have had a really good grade on him in the draft that are now poking around saying, hey, could he come loose? And they may not even necessarily need a quarterback. If the asset's going to be cheap enough, you take it and then you go, well, we'll figure it out and we'll bring him in. And maybe we've got a quarterback who has still 2 years left in front of him. Let's go and get this guy and we'll see if we have something in 2 years. Sort of, I think, like how the Jets, I think, will end up approaching Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson's not going anywhere if Aaron Rodgers does. Jets are going to keep Zach Wilson, and they're going to try to figure out if they can salvage him over the Rodgers tenure. So I think it would be kind of similar to that. I don't know that people are going to say, well, teams that need a starting quarterback. So it's like Washington or, Atlanta or some of these teams that are test running some new starters. I don't know. I don't know that they're calling San Francisco saying, hey, let's roll Trey Lance in here and see if he can be a starter for us. No, I think it's more going to be teams with established starters where they want to maybe get a year and look at Trey Lance for a year, see how he looks in their system, and then figure it out from there, which fits Minnesota. And low key, I bet you Kirk Cousins is the 49ers quarterback in 2024. I would not be surprised if after all this shakes out, I don't know where Trey Lance is. I don't know what Brock Purdy's elbow looks like, but I feel like if Kirk Cousins is available in 2024 for nothing, I think that there's a solid chance or for like very little I think there's a chance that well, I mean, it would be nothing. Kyle, that's his quarterback. He figures out finally a way to reunite with Kirk Cousins. So
it is pretty interesting when you think about how long ago they were together, and then also just what the Niners do and don't need out of a quarterback. I think it would be a really good spot for Kirk Cousins. So the last question I'll ask you on Trey Lance is, right now, this is a man who's played 8 career games and started 4 in 2 years. 4 career starts. Do you think that in Trey Lance's NFL career, he will start more or less than 20 games?
Less. When you really look at the reality of his career since his one really big season remember, it was a Power 5, North Dakota State's not a Power 5 school. Okay. So there's even the level of competition that you're worried about, right? The layoff, the big gaps in when he's been able to play, the fact that he's already sustained an injury, and then again, getting down to the assessment of the 49ers and how they viewed him, I just find it hard to believe that he's ultimately going to end up being a starter in the NFL, despite, the talent that's there. Now, I will say this. I was wrong about Geno Smith, right? Last offseason, left and right, talked to people, in Seattle. They're like, Geno. And I'm just like, you guys stop it with this Geno crap. I was completely wrong.
So you were Allen Robinson over Geno.
right. I was pumping Allen Robinson. I was killing Geno. That really worked out well. Yeah, what a great duo that was. I was totally called that right. It's sort of like investing 3 first-round picks in a guy that later I can never start and don't want. All right.
You're in good company.
Yeah, I'm in good company, I would say. I don't know. I think the 49ers assessment is what it is. It's obvious, and unless this is just a confidence issue. So let's say it's like Okudah, right? Like Okudah needed a fresh start out of Detroit.
All the number 3 picks.
Maybe this is just a guy who just needs a fresh start, someone who believes in him. And I'll also say this. Look at what Mike McDaniel did for Tua, okay? Forget the concussions and all that other stuff. This was the first time that Tua had a coach who came in and fully believed in him. And they said, we're going to build it around you. And you could see the difference. It made a difference, right? It did. So maybe he just needs someone, a coach that really will pump him up and really believe in him. And maybe it makes a difference like it did with a guy like Tua. But it's only so many
Mike McDaniel the coach of every NFL team.
Yeah, we do.
What a pleasant world that would be. I spent some time with him at owners meetings this year, and he's just delightful to be around, in addition to a really great football mind.
He just has all the greatest drops. I always see the little clips of Mike McDaniel ripping on somebody or saying something funny, or I'm just like, that dude's a coach. Like, he's just, I don't know what it is about him. He's just a funny dude.
The 2 out of context clips I'll give you is one, we were talking about his daughter's incredible sunglasses, and then she wore a different pair the next day. And I'm like, how many pairs of sunglasses do your 2-year-old have? And he was like, as many as she needs to survive. And I was like, what? And then his other line, we were talking about Hungarian dragons. I don't know why. And he said he had 3 dragons named Hun, Gary, and Ian.
Jeez. Yeah, he's a different dude.
This is the content people came for right now.
Yes, absolutely. All right, let's throw it to the ad break, and we'll come back on the other side. And we're going to run through the NFC teams and talk about whether they've made the move that's going to make a difference in 2023. Or if that move is still on the table. All right, welcome back in. We're going to get to these NFC teams. We'll also do this for the AFC, but for this particular pod, we'll just keep it to the NFC alone. You and I are going to go through, again, just so people understand this. Have they made the move already, or have they made a big move that's really going to make a difference in 2023? Or is that move still on the table, and what would it have to be now that we're heading into the draft? And I'll start with the Eagles. Might as well begin with the NFC East. For me, I think the Eagles, they're in this position where they've got great draft capital. The way I would say they should manipulate these picks, they're 2 first-round picks. The second pick, I would figure out a way to kick it out, try to pick up a first-round asset in the 2024 draft, which I'm writing about this right now. It's very top-heavy, star-studded. big time, top 15 in the 2024 draft, right? But the 10th overall pick, I know it's rich and you could probably move back and take him, but for me personally, and I don't really trust Rashad Penny, I think you take Bijan, because everybody you talk to says up and down Bijan Robinson is at the very top of their draft evaluations. He's just running back. But he's absolutely complete. He's explosive. He's everything you would want out of this position, and he's going to make a dent. He's that type of guy who can be a, rushing leader as a rookie in year 2, in year 3. Most teams say, get 5 years out of him and move on. If you take him in the first round, you just signed Jalen to this contract. Okay. And maybe, I don't know if you move back or not or whatever, but I think, look, use that asset, take Bijan Robinson. I know the defense needs to continue rebuilding, but I'm kind of like the Peyton Manning Colts route. You just paid the dude a ton of money. Go ahead and keep adding around him if you can. And I know that's a lot of assets sunk into the offense, but this is the game now. It's not a defensive league anymore. It's an offensive league. And I think putting a superstar running back behind him would be something that would be just massive over the next 4 or 5 years.
I completely agree with you that Bijan is the move that will improve them. That's what I had too.
UT grad, so.
Hey, you're the one who went all in. I actually think, though, given the value of running backs right now, if they could find a pick to trade down even like 3, 4, or 5 spots, and I don't know what team, it's tough to project what team would want to make that trade without knowing who's still going to be available. But I think then you get even a little bit better value. You can get another asset who's going to be on a cheap deal with Jalen Hurts' expensive contract kicking in next year, even if that's a next year pick, and then you still get Bijan. So I agree, though. If the Eagles come away with Bijan at 10 or below, I think that should be considered a pretty big win. And I think also just getting a first-round guy like that, having his rights for 5 years, regardless what happens with the second contract, it's a win.
Right. All right, Dallas Cowboys. You tell me, have they made the move? And if not, what's the move on the table?
Yeah, so the Dallas Cowboys' 2 biggest needs, they actually did make trades for this offseason, and that being Brandon Cooks at receiver and Stephon Gilmore at cornerback. I think that's good in the sense that they now have the weapons on offense they need, and they now have what they were missing in terms of that deep, speedy threat last year. What I don't think they should do is be content at cornerback. I think that Stephon Gilmore is more of a 1-year stopgap. Trayvon Diggs' extension is coming up, and if I were them, I would still have questions of not whether he's worth being around, but whether he's worth the kind of deal that he will try to command. And I think that you draft another cornerback to start helping that immediately. I get that it's an offensive league. It's also a pass-friendly league right now, and you need the cornerbacks who can shut down somebody. So I think their move, draft a cornerback high.
Yeah, I actually like that. To me, picking up Cooks felt like a pitch perfect kind of addition on offense. And I love, you're right, thinking ahead in terms of planning for that negotiation with Diggs is going to be monumentally important. So no arguments for me whatsoever. The New York Giants. I think the Giants, I'm sorry, but I look at the wide receivers on that roster and I just don't, I'm like, there's nobody here who really scares me. So either it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to go get DeAndre Hopkins after having gone through the Kenny Golladay stuff. I think they're probably burned on going and getting the big tag wide receiver. I would say you should still at least have that on the table in case, but I think you end up drafting a wide receiver. Now look, the pick situation for them being at 25, it's not great. But this is that kind of a draft where, because of the diminutive nature of a number of these wide receivers, whether it's a Jordan Addison, whether it's a Zay Flowers, whether it's Josh Downs, there's going to be probably a quality, not perfect wide receiver sitting there for you at 25. I just think you got to make the move to add to the wide receivers that you have there. It's just not good enough. There's no scary player. And again, you might be even just drafting a career number 2 here. But I think it's the move you absolutely have to make, especially after you just do the deal with Daniel Jones. And you can't come out of this draft without a top end wide receiving asset, meaning day 1, early day 2 type of situation.
Yeah, I'm torn. I think that I agree they need a receiver high. I don't know if I would have it at their first pick with the quality of receivers in this draft where I think they're going to go. They did just get Darren Waller and Paris Campbell in free agency, and I know both of those are kind of high risk, high reward guys, but I think you pair that with a second rounder, and it's funny because when I started preparing for this show, I was like, I don't know who to give a cornerback to, and now I want to give one to everyone, but give Wink Martindale's defense some help. Like, he is scheming those guys well, and all of their offseason was like, let's just get a bunch of offensive guys. So I go defense first round, lockdown corner for the Giants.
All right, Commanders, what's your pleasure?
You think I'm crazy. I think that the Denver Broncos, just around the time of an ownership change, when they were trying to generate interest, went and did a big deal for Russell Wilson, and I want the Commanders to do the same. Go get Lamar Jackson, pair him with offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy, sort of like spark this franchise in the way it can. Don't wait while the momentum's hot. Go get Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I don't disagree with it now that the ownership changes in place. I feel differently about Washington. Before, under Daniel Snyder, I'd be like, no, this is just total disaster. Wouldn't go near it, especially if I was Lamar. I would have a completely different take on this now if I'm Lamar, because as you said, this is the ultimate refresher, not just with ownership, but you can go there and be the guy that leads them into the new stadium when that ultimately is built. I do like that as a potential splash if there's still a deal there to be done with Lamar. I agree in the sense that for me, I was just like, they got to get a quarterback, right? Like, I think I would not just rest on Sam Howell. I think you have to, in this draft, you have to sit there and situate yourself and see if there's a quarterback that either is going to get to you or if there's a potential trade partner to move up with. You know, is that Howie and the Eagles at 10? It just kind of depends what exactly happens with this quarterback class. So I don't know that they would love Hendon Hooker, but if it's one of the top 4 guys starts to slide like Levis, you know, you can take your swing there. You could even get really aggressive and I don't know, call Detroit, call Seattle, call the Cardinals, see how aggressive you can get and maybe go, knock it out of the park with an addition. But I'm with you. I'm not sold on let's just wager everything on Sam Howell. It feels a little bit like when Denver did that with Drew Lock and then it didn't work out. And we saw how that all ultimately spiraled into what became Russell Wilson.
Last question before we leave the NFC East. Do you think the Snyders, the new ownership group, or neither are going to be involved in what kind of strategy this draft is taking?
It would not be. The Snyders shouldn't. Frankly, if I was anyone in that front office, I would lock them out. They can't be involved in this. Like this, not.
How about the new owners?
Yeah, the new owners should be. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as long as it's not. It has to, and I think it's realistic at this point, but it has to be realistic that the sale's going to go through.
Yeah.
Denver, they were kind of left to their own devices. George Payton, he ran that, on his own. And so, yeah, I think it's just got to be, you're going to have to, at least, George had run all that prep on his own. So is Washington. So, but definitely not the Snyders. God, don't know. They can't be involved with anything anymore. They shouldn't even be allowed to touch anything with the franchise anymore. Somebody should go to their house and collect everything with Washington Commanders on it. And they're no longer allowed to even own any apparel. All right, we're leaving the NFC East. Let's run over to the NFC South. Falcons, I don't care what anybody says. They have to wake up, and it's like Washington. If there's an ability to get involved with Lamar Jackson, I think Arthur Blank is being crazy. Like, this is just stupid. If you're willing to get involved with Deshaun Watson, you should be willing to get involved with Lamar Jackson. I'm not going to let this go. I'm not going to let this go until Lamar is taking snaps again in the NFL. And, it's stupid to me that we've gotten to this point. And not that they haven't had a good offseason. They have. But I don't know there's been any single move this offseason that made me go, okay, that's what's going to completely stir this whole thing up and change things. Maybe it'll be Desmond Ridder. We'll see starting him. But it's just nuts to me that they're not in on Lamar Jackson in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I support that. I think that they've done some good things on defense, getting Bud Dupree, getting Jeff Okudah, and now go get that quarterback.
All right, Panthers. What's up with the Panthers?
Panthers. It was funny when you and I were talking about this before the show, and you were like, obviously they need to get the quarterback right. And I had almost forgotten that was something to even discuss because it feels like such a done deal. But what I will say is that the most important thing they could do is pick the best quarterback, not just – I don't think they're falling into the trap, but we might be falling into the trap of Frank Reich has had all these super tall quarterbacks. That's what he wants. That's what he's used to. Or maybe that's the guys he showed up to coach. And I don't think that means that he can't do it. I don't think that means that is his number one requirement in a quarterback. So go get Bryce Young, put the infrastructure around him to succeed, get the protection, and let's roll. I'm excited about what Carolina has ahead.
I know people are going to say that Reich has a type. Well, guess what? Everybody's type in the NFL at quarterback is like big, strong-armed. I mean, like it's just a type. That's not Frank's type. That's everybody's type in the NFL, okay? Like create them in the lab. They're going to be like 6'4", 225. They're going to have Patrick Mahomes' arm. They're going to have, Justin Fields' legs or Lamar Jackson's legs. I mean, come on. So I would just say I agree with that. I think Frank knows, I would trust Frank to know who is his best quarterback. So whether it's Stroud or Young, whoever, if Frank says, this is the guy, he's the leader, he's got the quintessential everything that you need at the quarterback spot, we need to draft him and forget about whether or not the size is an issue or not. And hopefully David Tepper will step back a little bit and just sort of let the people who are going to be coaching this player really lead the way on this one. Yeah. All right. Swinging over the Saints. The Saints, to me, it's interesting. Like, I do think there's still moves left on the table, but I think there's like this tandem. They onboarded an asset, they offboarded an asset, and they did it to perfection. You brought in Derek Carr without spending any assets on him draft-wise. You spent money, but there could have been a point where you could have traded for him. You didn't do that. You stood firm, and you didn't have to give up anything. Awesome. And then you offboarded Sean Payton, and you got a first and second round pick out of him. That's perfection. That's exactly what you want to do if you're in that scenario where you have a coach going out the door and you have a centerpiece quarterback coming in the door. Now they just have to use those assets, to perfection. And, we could talk about, should they add a wide receiver piece, maybe, where they draft. I mean, you could add a running back. There's a lot of different, things that they could do with the picks. To me, it's just maximizing those picks now that you've had the tandem move and pulled it off about as perfectly as you could. Just spend wisely.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, and I totally agree. It's like they've done in some ways that they've set the foundation for the move they need to do, and now go capitalize on it.
All right, the Buccaneers, which apparently were only one of the two teams that Bijan Robinson had official visits with. Philly and the Buccaneers are the only two teams. That's what I don't know if that's true, but that's now what I've heard. You tell me what the Buccaneers had to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I feel like that is a common line of get Tampa that running back. They need it. They need the run game. That was a huge issue last year. And to that, I would say if you don't have a strong offensive line, your running back's not going anywhere, even if he's Bijan Robinson, unless you're just drafting him as more for receiver purposes, in which case, why are you drafting a running back? I think that they let Donovan Smith go after 8 seasons. He was really anchoring that line. I think they should get offensive tackle help, whether that's at 19 or moving up a little bit. I think that's going to be really important. I think that for Baker Mayfield to succeed, he's going to need the offensive tackle. So I'm not saying that he's your answer. I know there are people who think they should get a quarterback. I think they've got a few question marks. They should see what Baker can do while sort of building for the years after and invest in offensive line.
Yeah, they're at 19. And, I think there's a different mix of offensive linemen that could be available to them. But if you really want to pick, have the pick of the litter type of a situation, I think obviously the Bears concern me at 9. You would seem to want to get in front of the Bears. If you can't get in front of the Bears, I'd call Howie at 10 and, see if maybe there's an ability to move from 19 to 10. And whether it's if a quarterback slides and that's who you're targeting, if it's, as you said, an offensive line piece, you're going to be able to get you're going to have a pick of a few different things at 10 potentially. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And I think it would not be a bad thing if they tried to move up. The Lions moved to the NFC North. I think they pick at 6. you got to get something special here. There has to be something special about this pick. Either you can get the player that's special at 6, or maybe you move up a spot or 2 spots or to Arizona at 3. One way or another, you have to take this moment and pluck a special player. To me, I know there's concerns about Jalen Carter. I get all that. I'm sorry, but if you put him on your interior line next to Aiden Hutchinson, I think anywhere, they have two good young edge rushers. Put him on that defensive line. That to me is special. That is a special swing. I mean, look, is it risky? Yes, it's risky. But I think both of these things I'm going to suggest are risky, but you are risking because you want that ceiling and you want to maximize this. Anthony Richardson's the other one. I think if you sit at 6 and he's your guy, either if he comes to you at 6, great. If you got to move up to get him, whether that's 3 or wherever, go get him. I think it's interesting that the Lions clearly are not in any big hurry to do any kind of an extension with Jared Goff. Goff came out and said, like, he hasn't even been approached by them to do an extension. You can't escape the fact that it's like $20 million off their cap if they don't do an extension with him and they, walk away from him. And Richardson gives them, if you were to draft Richardson, Goff gives you the ability to sit Richardson for his entire rookie season, which I think is really going to be truly necessary. It is a reach for something special. Plus, you have another first round pick, man. Take this one, burn it, reaching for something big. And if it doesn't work out, hey, you really didn't expect to have the 6th overall pick anyway. At least you tried.
Yeah, before your explanation, I was going to be very anti going to get Anthony Richardson for the reason that Jared Goff has this momentum. The offense under Ben Johnson has the momentum, and I'm really nervous about messing with the momentum and not instilling the confidence in this group. I think if you want Richardson, though, I think you make a good point. I don't think they move on from Jared Goff now. He's under contract 2 more years at an extremely reasonable price relative to the current quarterback market when you factor in the way he played, especially the second half of the year. But if you can sit Jared Goff and Anthony Richardson both in a room and be like, Jared's our guy right now. Anthony, we see you in the future. We want to give you both a chance to succeed over the coming years. Jared is the guy. Anthony, support him, learn along the way. That would make me more comfortable. But I think you need to tell Jared Goff and both of them. I think you need to be very clear of like, make it known Jared's our starter right now. Don't make this a quarterback controversy in 2023 because it's not worth it.
It would be Mahomes, Alex Smith in Kansas City is what it would be. Alex was the guy. They took Mahomes. It was clear what they were doing. It's clear where they wanted to go at the quarterback position. But there was no question Alex was going to be their starter. And then, look, is there some awkwardness to it? Yeah, but you just got to figure out, you're going to have to figure out how to help Jared get to where he wants to be. And maybe part of that is just being like, hey, Jared, if we won't trade you, we won't trade you. Like if we decide that in a year, Anthony Richardson's ready to go, we're going to cut you and you're going to be free agent. You can go wherever you want. You get to pick wherever you want to go and you get to maximize however much money you want to make on your next deal. Maybe not the worst thing in the world for Jared Goff. So, yeah, I really like that. Packers. There's only one thing I can think of that you can say with the Packers, and we're all
okay, but it seems obvious, and I have a caveat that I think changes it. Obviously, get the Aaron Rodgers deal done is the move, but I would add to that, get it done before the draft. That sounds like, of course they should. The draft's in a week, and by the time people listen to this, it's probably in less than a week. Get this done. Get the compensation this year. Don't keep pushing it off. Don't create these issues. Like, this is silly. I know that you want the right compensation. I know that it's tricky. How long is Aaron Rodgers going to play for? But let's get this done. And by the way, once you get that draft comp, take your 2023 pick and draft a tight end in the first round because it's a deep year for tight ends. You sent Robert Tonyan or you let him go to the Bears. Mercedes Lewis could go with Aaron Rodgers. And most of all, I just love that Aaron Rodgers would be gone and they would take a pass catcher in the first round. Like, we need that to happen.
I want a wide receiver. I want him to take, whether
I agree that would be the best, revengeful football gods move. But when you actually look at the talent, there's just more talent at tight end.
Unless it's Jackson Smith and Jigba's there. I mean, fair. If you can get him, the wealth of all the all-juice team calls, I will say, that was the one guy everybody agreed, even if they weren't really blown away by him, they all agreed it's the best wide receiver in the class, or pretty close. And there's a couple little arguments I got into about him with some other guys. But I Yeah, get it done by the draft. It makes sense. You got to use an asset this year. You need something out of that deal. And, what's on the table right now is a second-round pick in this draft. That's a good asset. And, worry about 2024, get the conditional first or whatever. Maybe the only other thing I would say is if you don't like the player that's there at 15, see if maybe you can move back. You said it's a deep tight end draft. You could probably get more than one good tight end in the tail end of the first round. See if you can pick up another first round asset in 2023, because if Jordan Love doesn't work out, you're going to want to probably, unless you just completely crash and burn and have one of the top 2 picks, you're going to want to spend your first round pick next year, hopefully the Jets graduated first round pick next year, and maybe another first round pick if you can somehow pick one up by moving back in this draft to try and get into that top 2. The 2 teams in the top 2, unless it's a team that already has a marquee quarterback, like a stud franchise quarterback, and those don't typically end up being the teams that pick 1 and 2, they're not moving unless you're going to offer them. It's going to have to be the world. So if Jordan Love doesn't work out, you better start stacking assets right now. All right, swinging to the Vikings. I kind of feel like they already made the move. The move that I like, that I think that'll make a difference, is just bringing Brian Flores in, to be your defensive coordinator. I think it's a great move. I think it's I love the pairing with Kevin O'Connell. It's the classic, like, Kevin's got the offense, he's taking care of it. He's not going to tinker defensively with anything. Flo gets what he wants, which is to have total autonomy with his defense. I don't know. I just love it. I love it. I love that coaching addition and being able to take Flores, who I think, look, you can say whatever you want about, the strife in Miami and everything that went down there. He was a fantastic defensive play caller for the New England Patriots. And I think it's an absolute no-brainer move for me to bring in a guy who I think is probably going to end up getting another head coaching job anyway.
Yeah, so I stick by the rules, and the rules are what's the move they can make. But no, I think you make a really good point that they made the Brian Flores move, and now that means their next move needs to be tailoring their draft defensively to go capitalize on what their coach can bring to the table. So I'm excited about it, and I'm glad you reminded us that, because I don't know that we're all thinking, if we're not Vikings fans, like, hey, remember the Vikings just made this huge coaching move?
Big one.
And I think that when we did our power rankings a few weeks ago, and I was like, I think the Vikings could plummet, because I think that's a lot of their success last year was just like really fragile. I wasn't keeping in mind the Brian Flores move. So I think that that's a really good point of what's their defense going to be like and how much is that going to be an impact this year.
All right, Chicago Bears, what do you got?
In Chicago, Peter Skoronski, he's just coming across town. He'd be coming from Northwestern to the Bears. Is he a tackle? Is he a guard? Either way, he's great. He can help Justin Fields. I think the Bears are more than a move away, and I think they should trade down. So I know that you might regret passing on a guy like that, but I think that if you're trying to ultimately win a Super Bowl versus just be competitive in your division the year after Aaron Rodgers leaves, go get more assets. Package them next year, and then you'd have, 3 first-rounders potentially next year?
I mean, it's funny because this is coming from the person that covers Zach Martin, and everybody says he's not a tackle, he's going to be Zach Martin, and you know the value of a Zach Martin on an offensive line. I'm with you, though. They're not a one-move away team, definitely not, especially on that offensive line.
Right, and I think that that's the point, is that when the Cowboys drafted Zach Martin, they were in a different place than where the Bears are now.
Yeah. All right, moving to the NFC West. I'll start with the Seahawks. It's a no-brainer to me. You got to draft Jalen Carter at 5. Like, you have to. John Schneider, Pete, they have a history of, juggling players with red flags. Totally makes sense. They need a defensive interior player. He's a star. I mean, he looks like a star. He's just got everything that they need right now. It would be insanity for them to not take Carter at 5. I don't know what would need to happen for them to not, take Jalen Carter at 5. Bryce Young falls to 5. I mean, this to me is the absolute A1 most sensible and fitting place for this draft pick to occur. And if that just probably means it won't.
I agree with you. I think I trust Pete Carroll to handle Jalen Carter off the field. I think on the field that number 5 is great value, given that he'll be falling because of some of these off-field issues. And lastly, that the idea of them taking a quarterback, I would not do if I were Seattle. I get that Geno Smith, you just signed this contract. Is it the long-term solution? Is it a few years? You just saw in Seattle what happens when a quarterback doesn't feel like he's supported and there's discontent. You've got something good going right now. You've got that young running back. Go ride that and take Jalen Carter.
Yeah, I'm with you. Cardinals. I'm glad I didn't take this one because I was struggling with one. This is such a mess with the Cardinals.
Okay, I kind of wish the Bears didn't go first in this exercise because I feel even more strongly about Arizona. But Arizona, absolutely, I want to trade down. I mean, it'd be great if you can get an asset for DeAndre Hopkins too. That is a good move. And I get that we're kind of giving away all their talent this year, but their quarterback, Kyler Murray, is not going to be healthy for the start of the season. He's probably not going to be fully healthy at all this season. And they just got rid of a lot of decent assets. J.J. Watt retired. They let guys go. I don't think this is their year, and I think that they need to be smart about that.
Yeah, especially at that 3 spot to me, unless it's like Carter. Again, it's like if you're maximizing the value of sitting at 3, that's getting someone to come up and take a quarterback. So you're getting a bunch of draft assets, or you're taking Carter, who's really talent-wise going to be the number 1 on a lot of different boards. If you're not doing one of those 2 things, there's no reason for you to, it just doesn't make any sense to select a player here that doesn't fit into either the Carter scenario and then potentially trading out for, somebody who wants to come up and get a quarterback. So to me, not only trading out, I would say like maybe move back a couple times, like see if you can trade out once, twice, just gather a bunch of assets for Monty Ossenfort. And it feels just like one of those years that's not a reboot year, but with Kyler being out, like I just wouldn't put a lot of pressure on the franchise to get a lot of traction this season. Yeah. All right. Moving on to the 49ers. I think they have made their most, I think it was actually 2 moves. The Steve Wilkes move, obviously at defensive coordinator, after we saw how he performed in Carolina. I think he's got an opportunity to pick up where DeMeco Ryans left off. I think that's another huge coaching addition that was made that is great. The difference is he's going into a situation where the defensive coordinator was already hitting at like 100% capacity. So he just now has to live up to that, which is difficult. But they made the swing they needed to make to see if they can still try to hit that ceiling again with a coordinator. He's the guy you go and get if it wasn't going to be like Vic Fangio to try and maximize the defensive coordinator spot. I think low key Sam Darnold might be a good pickup for them because they are going to need a quarterback who's functional, especially if Trey Lance is someone that they deal. And I think Darnold has ability, and I as much as I didn't want to do it, if you go back and you look at how he played down the stretch last year, like actually throw a couple of the games on, he had a pretty decent finish last year. And I do believe in Kyle Shanahan when it comes to trying to get something out of whatever's left there for Sam Darnold. So I think it's just functionally, they patched up the defensive coordinator spot and they're trying to sort out the quarterback spot as best they possibly can. I don't know if Trey Lance, dealing Trey Lance factors into that. If they can get something better in the third, great. I would add that in. I just don't think they get anything better in the third for him.
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point. I love that you brought in 2 defensive coordinator hires because I think those are underrated moves around the league that are great. The one thing I'd ask you is, if you deal Trey Lance, you've got Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold, how comfortable are you with that? I assume you at least want some sort of third
Right.
quarterback. Are you going draft? Are you getting a vet? What do you need to feel good about your quarterback position if those are the 2 that you still have?
That's a really good question. I don't know that you would go and draft another quarterback because then you're working with basically a second-year quarterback in your quarterback room, a rookie quarterback in your quarterback room, and then Sam Darnold. And I feel like, you need another element, another layer of experience. Maybe not, Darnold had starts and all these different things. I'd look around and see if there's a veteran backup piece that you could potentially add.
Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, Joe Flacco, any of those interest you?
I don't know if I would do. I don't know that I would go and get kind of what Darnold is, which is an ex-starter who had some ability. Like like, how many of those guys do you want to bring in? You know, you really
Right.
you just collect them all and have the complete set of failed high draft picks. I do agree, though. I would say they need to add something to that position, particularly if Lance goes out the door. There's zero question about that. So, yeah, that's where I'm at on that. All right, close this out. The Rams, who, by the way, I don't know if this is public or not, but it's not called it's going to be called the Draft House this year. It's going to be called the Draft Lab this year, which I don't know if that's been reported, but it was.
Are we getting beakers?
Well, no,
lab coats?
When it was uttered to me, I will just say the person who told me it's going to be called the Draft Lab, I was like, are y'all like fabricating first round picks? Because that's kind of what you need. Like, are you gonna grow some first rounders in petri dishes? Because that's why it should be called the Draft Lab at this point.
Yes. So for me, the Rams, you may not be aware, they just traded away a player named Jalen Ramsey, who was a pretty good cornerback and a pretty key staple to their defense, and I need them to replace that. They don't have a first-round pick, but they have the number 36 overall pick, which, according to my research, is the highest pick the Rams have had since picking Jared Goff first overall in 2016. So go get a cornerback there. I think that generally is a good space to draft cornerbacks, that like early second round. It's what they need. They can have a guy who can kind of anchor their defense for a while because Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald were their big guys. Jalen's gone. I don't know how many more years Aaron Donald is going to be there, so I want that cornerback now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think... Yeah, that's definitely an area of need when you offload a Jalen Ramsey. There's got to be some talent stacked there. So totally agree. All right, so that's it, right? We're done. We will be back on Monday. It was wonderful having you back in again. Hopefully you can be here next Monday as well. That would be great. Maybe we can get Charles McDonald and Jori on at the same time.
Wow.
I haven't done that in a long time. But check back in with us on Monday. You can get Jori Epstein on Twitter at Jori Epstein. You can get myself at Charles Robinson. You can get our ace producer, Stone Rochelle, at SJ Rochelle. And as always, and with an update, please help us keep Therese Paylor's legacy alive with the new All Juice Tee or hoodie at breakingtea.com/Therese. It is redesigned. It's awesome. It's crisp looking. I love the black tee that I've gotten. It's amazing. So if you could, remember that those purchases go to support the Therese Paylor scholarships at Howard University and Missouri. Check them out. They're really awesome. So if you could also check out our new NBA podcast, Ball Don't Lie, featuring Vinny Goodwill, Jake Fisher, and Dan Devine, we would appreciate it, as well as our new MLB podcast, Bandwagon, featuring Hannah Kaiser and Zach Kreiser, both available wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave a 5-star review, tell a friend, help us grow the family. Draft is coming, week away. See you Monday. Peace.